Sup? Is Forza Horizon 5 a bad game? That's a question I've been asking myself a lot lately. And before I get into this question, I think it's important for you to understand at which point I am with the game. So I have not played the game properly in a very long time. So when the game came out, I played it for, I think, 3 months semi-regularly. I got through all of the weekly playlists as well. I played through all of the single-player content. So as far as the single-player content goes, I'm pretty much at 100%. I didn't spend too much time with the multiplayer. But like after 3 months, I kind of dropped the game and then only went back in for expansions and DLCs and other major additions to the game. And so currently I sit at a little over 200 hours with the game, which I think is like a fair amount of playtime, I think. The problem is if you listen to people talk about the game, it always really depends on the kind of playtime they have. And I feel like the more time someone spends on the game, the less likely they are going to recommend the experience. Because over time, the more you play, the more the bad stuff starts to show and the less you will appreciate the good stuff. So if you have someone who has like several thousand hours in the game, yeah, obviously they're not gonna recommend the game. Obviously they're gonna say they hate the game. It's kind of a meme, but it's definitely kind of true. So I just kind of wanted to go through Horizon 5 one more time to give it kind of like one more review now that it's been out for, I think, almost 4 years. Which is definitely the longest we've been stuck with a Horizon game ever since the very first one. And I definitely remember back when the game came out, sentiment was very, very positive. In fact, even I wrote a positive Steam review on the game, which I kind of regret these days. I don't think I stand by everything that I said in that Steam review. And I think my opinion also has kind of changed as I started to play the game more. And yeah, to say that Horizon 5 had a rough launch would be kind of an understatement. A lot of content and game modes from previous Horizon games were just flat out missing. This is something I'll talk about later again as well. But in particular, the ranked game mode from Horizon 5, completely gone. And that wasn't even an accident, it's something that they vehemently defended because they wanted the game to be less competitive and more casual. I don't think how removing the ranked mode is gonna help with that when you have the competitive people and the casual people in the same lobby. But okay. And there were also massive server instabilities. Like, I remember back then, convoys were just straight up not working most of the time. So, yeah, Horizon 5 definitely had a really, really rough launch, and this is definitely one of the primary things that I remember from when I first started to play the game. However, despite all of that, the general perception of the game when it came out was still very, very positive. And I was wondering why that is. Like, why is it that the game had a rough launch, and these days people are a little bit more mixed or maybe even more negative on Horizon 5? When, in the beginning, when the game came out, reviews were extremely positive and people seem to generally like the game as well. And I think it's mostly due to the opening hours having a really great presentation. So the game does a really, really good job of just introducing you to the world and giving you interesting, fun stuff to do. So, for example, in the beginning of the game, you get to do these expeditions at certain points in the game. And I think those are genuinely great. Like the expeditions where you get to interact with parts of the world, get to see certain things that you might miss otherwise. You get to learn a little bit about Mexico as a country, and you get to try out different cars in cool ways. I think the expeditions are definitely the highlight of all of the single-player content that this game has to offer. And this is what you mostly spend your time doing, like working towards the expeditions and then doing them. I think that's where the game was really, really at its best in those opening hours. I think that's why I think the general perception of the game was so positive, both from reviewers and people, like general gamers in general. However, once you're done with all of that and you enter the Hall of Fame, as it's called, things start to just kind of fall off from there. You'll notice that there's just less to do overall, especially if you want to play alone. For the most part, things just kind of stay the same as before. Like you'll notice that there isn't really anything new or interesting to do that you couldn't already do in Horizon 4. And I think that's like generally my main point about this game is just how much it is still the same as Horizon 4, how it is largely still the same game at its core. It's got the same strengths, so we still have really, really genuinely great handling. I think in general the Forza series, but in particular Horizon, still does simcade handling the best out of everything we have up until this point. But also stuff like the tuning is still great. You can still customize cars, not visually I mean, but like, you know, in terms of performance. You can do a lot to them. There's so many different ways you can build a car. You can take an Aventador and turn it into an off-roader or a drift car, or you could take like an off-road car and turn it into like a drag car build. There's like almost nothing you can't build in Horizon 5, and that's just a general strength that also kind of carried over from Horizon 4 and even previous Horizon games. But likewise, it also carries these same weaknesses, I feel like, as Horizon 4. So we still have really poor AI and generally just fairly boring and uninteresting single-player races. As well as a progression model that is just boring. Like, I gotta be honest, like, I understand that, you know, obviously they're trying to cater towards casual people who may not have the time to grind out stuff, and that's absolutely fine. But I feel like they completely overcorrected into the other direction with Horizon 5 in particular, where they just throw so much stuff at you in this game that nothing ever feels earned. And if nothing feels earned, it just doesn't feel like that there's any point to doing anything anymore. But all of that were issues in Horizon 4, as already mentioned. So let's just talk about what's genuinely better about Horizon 5. So as I already mentioned, we have the expeditions, and this honestly goes for all scripted sequences. So you also have these story events, which I'm gonna be honest, I still don't quite like as much. But I can at least acknowledge that they are generally an improvement over Horizon 4's Horizon stories, which were very copy and paste. There was a lot of time wasted in those. So for example, in Horizon 4, you had to first drive to the actual objective and then do it there, which is completely pointless. Whereas in Horizon 5, it just starts immediately. So I think anything that is like a scripted sequence is just genuinely better in Horizon 5. The same also goes for car sounds, and this was like a really weird thing with Horizon 4 in particular, is that the car sounds in general were just a massive downgrade, inexplicably so. And with Horizon 5, I think they definitely improved the car sounds again. There's still some that don't quite sound right, but considering the game has like over 800 cars at this point, I think overall the car sounds are generally an improvement over Horizon 4, and generally one of the things that this game did better. But for me, what I actually like the most about Horizon 5 and what really is like the main thing about the game that I really enjoy is the Event Lab builder. So the Event Lab wasn't really called Event Lab in Horizon 4, but it was already there. And in Horizon 4, it was unbelievably basic. You really only had like 40-ish building blocks, I think, to do anything. It was very limited. It really was just kind of like more of a tech demo, so to say. And in Horizon 5, they really expand on it. Like, I think the Event Lab is, honestly, in my opinion, one of the coolest things that they added to Horizon 5, and probably my own personal favorite feature. The amount of maps and how wildly different they can vary. The stuff that people build is absolutely unbelievable, and it's interesting because the Event Lab as a feature, as like a building feature, isn't even that great. It's still very clunky. It's not like fully amazing. But it's just what people managed to do with the Event Lab builder, which is also due to how many props they started to add to the Event Lab builder. Like, they actually supported that thing extremely well as you know, updates progressed. It led to people building some genuinely cool stuff in the Event Lab mode. And I think that's, for me, that's like the main thing that Horizon 5 really added and evolved in some way. But unfortunately, that's kinda it. We already went over the handling and the tuning and everything that is generally good about the Horizon games. And other than that, there isn't really that much good that Horizon 5 really added to the game, in my opinion. So let's talk about some of the bad. I think first and foremost on that list that people also mention all the time that Horizon 5 really dropped the ball in is the map. And I gotta say, I fully agree. So initially when it was announced that Horizon 5 takes place in Mexico, I was like, I wonder how that's gonna work. Because like, frankly, I don't really have much experience with Mexico as a location, so I didn't really know how this was gonna pan out. And now that we've been playing the game for a few years, I can say that it is probably the weakest map in the entire series. So large parts of it are just really barren, empty wasteland that are just a brownish gray. They are not interesting. And in general, I think in general, the map feels very flat overall. The only real elevation change you'll find is near the mountain. And everything outside of that is completely flat. Which is just generally also a downgrade from Horizon 4, which I felt like had way more elevation. And in a sense also a downgrade from Horizon 3. Now Horizon 3's map, in terms of road layout and elevation, wasn't as good. But what Horizon 3's map Australia had was biomes. Like, the different districts in Horizon 3 felt completely different from each other. So you can drive for like 5 minutes in one direction, you'll be in a place that looks completely different. And I feel like with Horizon 5, they could have maybe taken the different biomes that Horizon 3 had and the elevation changes that Horizon 4 had, but they took neither. So it's as flat as Australia, while also being as samey as the UK from Horizon 4. So overall, the map is definitely like one of the weakest parts of the game. And now one conspiracy theory, I'm gonna call it that, a conspiracy theory that people have, is that this was done in favor of the Eliminator game mode. Like, the Eliminator game mode is the reason why the map in Horizon 5 is the way it is. I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't know why everyone repeats this. No one said this, ever. At least from the development team. It was never explicitly said that the map was built this way for the Eliminator game mode. Now, I understand why you might think it makes sense, because, like, large parts of the map are just open and flat, and this is obviously makes the Eliminator game mode easier, I guess. But I highly doubt that they would build an entire map around a game mode that even back in Horizon 4, where it was introduced, number 1, wasn't played very much, and number 2, wasn't supported at all. Like, the Eliminator game mode never got any updates, which kind of also implies that it wasn't really played as much, because obviously you'd think if it's the most played or one of the more played game modes, they would support it. You know, they would add things to it, they would change stuff, but they never did. So I find it kind of hard to believe that for a game mode that isn't popular, they would build an entire map around it. I genuinely just think the map is the way it is because that's how they wanted to make it. There's no deeper reason to it. Once again, this was never officially confirmed by any of the developers that the Eliminator game mode had an effect on how the map is built. It's just something that someone came up with at one point, and then everyone started to repeat it because it makes sense. But in reality, there's no proof for this, and if you really think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the Eliminator game mode is not popular. I think it is just built the way it is because that's how they wanted to build it, because they wanted to stay authentic to Mexico, which I think is what was more important. Like, and it was also really obvious to me in the marketing material back when they promoted the game, is that authenticity to Mexico was like the most important thing to them. Like, that's the one thing they wanted that was really important to them, and that's why the map is the way it is, because it's not really built for a fun racing game. It's built for authenticity, and that doesn't really work well with a racing game. That's all there's to it. There's nothing to do with the Eliminator game mode. But moving on, since we were already talking about the Eliminator, I will say that the online game modes, to me, also just felt less good in this one. So, for one, you have the ranked game mode, which was completely removed, as I mentioned earlier. Now, I gotta be honest, the ranked mode in Horizon 4 wasn't the greatest. It was mainly because the ranking system and how the game rates your performance was just not great. It was just fairly broken, honestly. But the idea or the point of a sequel is to take those things and make those better. Not to remove them outright. So the fact that there's to this day, no ranked game mode in Horizon 5 is just such a weird misstep. Like, I don't know why you would just outright remove content from the previous game, other than, I don't know, like, it's just weird to me. But then the other game modes that they have aren't really that great either. Like, we already talked about the Eliminator game mode, and I genuinely think the Eliminator game mode is actually worse in Horizon 5 than it was in Horizon 4. And it is, once again, because the map is so empty. It just makes the races in the Eliminator boring, because you're just driving straight. Whereas in Horizon 4, there was actually a lot of skill involved in trying to dodge trees and trying to see what path to the finish line is the most optimal, you know, if it's maybe better to follow the road for a while. You also had rivers going through the map where you had to, like, really know how to, like, avoid those rivers and where the closest bridge is. So I think overall the Eliminator game mode actually worked much better in Horizon 4 and was more fun as a result. But also, it hasn't been updated at all. Like, even then, like, it has been getting 0 updates, 0 improvements. It's just like something that they plopped into the game, no one bothered, and then they never bothered to actually improve it. And then one game mode that they introduced fairly recently, in fact, this was like, I mean, I say recently, it's not super recent anymore, but it was the last game mode that they added, which is the hide and seek mode. It's bad. It's just really bad. I'm sorry. Like, with this one, I'm just like, I'm at a complete loss. So, first of all, no one asked for it. People asked for all kinds of things when it comes to updates with Horizon 5. And I understand that as a developer, you're kind of always looking for something to surprise people with, for, like, you know, something that people didn't really know they wanted, but they definitely wanted once they started to play it. So, like, I get it, you know, but this was just something that I think on paper already doesn't work. Like, a hide and seek game mode with cars, it's something that YouTubers do if they run out of content, but that's it. Or maybe you do with friends if you're, like, really bored with the game. But the way the game mode works just does not work. Like, it's completely unbalanced. First of all, like, it's just, you will 100% win as a hider every single time. Like, you have such a hard time winning as a seeker team, even if your team of seekers is, like, overwhelming. It's so hard to win as a Seeker. Like, it's so unbelievably unbalanced. And generally, for the most part, there's just nothing going on. And I also think the perks that the Hider has to shut down other cars is not only super overpowered, but also really boring. Because when I get hit with the power-up, I just lose control of my car for like 10 seconds. Where's that fun? Like, it's just such an inherently terrible game mode that I just never really bothered to go back to. And moving on, we're still not done. They still proceeded with the FOMO content in the form of the playlist, which I generally wasn't really a fan of. This was really the main reason why I stopped playing the game after like its first 3 months, because I realized I'm not playing the game because I'm still having fun. I'm just playing the game because I don't want to miss out on the content. I don't want to miss out on the cars. And the problem with that is that at some point the rewards, or multiple points in fact, the rewards from the festival playlist were just downright bad. Like, there were cars that people just didn't care about. There were cars from previous seasons that they just reintroduced over and over. And probably worst of all, there were cars from the previous game that were just generally accessible in the previous game that now landed in the festival playlist as a FOMO car, which is so bad, like, in general. And that's not even to mention the general structure of the playlist just being boring. Like, you're doing the same thing every week. Every week you're doing the same thing. I think only lately they started to implement the event lab stuff a little bit more into the festival playlist, which is definitely the way to go. But for the most part, you're doing the same thing every week. It's just not interesting. They're coming up with really not anything good to add to the festival playlist, to the point where I just feel like it's a grind every week. It's a grind every week that's not fun, that's not interesting. And at some point, like, the festival playlist, for me at least, became one of my least favorite things about Horizon 5. Now, one of the great things that Horizon 4 added to the series was the Seasons feature. And it definitely peaked in that game. So the Seasons in Horizon 4 really transformed the entire map. For better or for worse, you know, especially like when we're talking about winter, at least I can say that, you know, Horizon 4 did a much better job of keeping itself fresh due to the seasons changing every week and how much that affects the entire visuals, the handling, pretty much the entire game. And this has been unbelievably downgraded in Horizon 5 to the point where it doesn't really feel like seasons even exist anymore. So technically they do. It's more like weather cycles that are in the game, and maybe you get like a bit of snow on the volcano, but for the most part the seasons just feel like they're almost not present at all. It almost feels like the seasons are just an excuse for the festival playlists to still be in the game, but like when it comes to the actual like game itself and how the map changes, the seasons might not be there at all and no one would be able to tell the difference. And lastly, I want to mention the character dialogue, which it's not like a massive complaint because you can really just mute it. Unfortunately, you can't skip cutscenes in this game for some reason. But the character dialogue obviously is unbelievably grating, how everyone is always constantly praising you as like the biggest superstar. And also like the weird wannabe Latino language that's constantly being used, like this like Spanglish, I think people call it. It's just cringe. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just cringe, and the character dialogue is really hard to bear for me sometimes. But I do realize that not everyone feels the same, so it's like really a minor point that I just wanted to throw in at the end. So that's a lot of bad, as we can already see. There are some other things that I think are more of a mixed bag, and I think, first of all, I want to mention the graphics. Another reason why the graphics are a mixed bag for me is because overall the graphics are good. The game looks realistic, and it looks more realistic than Horizon 4. There's more sophisticated lighting system at play that is very, very noticeable in this game. But the reason why it's such a mixed bag for me is because while it is more realistic, the game looks more dull. Like, the entire color palette of the game feels so much more toned down and dull compared to the previous games, which just makes the entire game look less interesting. Because the thing with realism and realistic graphics in a game is that you get used to it eventually. Eventually you stop kind of thinking about this. You stop thinking like, oh man, this looks so realistic. At some point, all that matters is the actual aesthetics and how interesting the game is to look at for the hours to come in the game. And that's where I think they really dropped the ball. I think to this day, Horizon 1 and 2 still looked the best by far because they just blasted, these games were bursting with color. And I think those are just completely gone with Horizon 5. It's realism, yes, it looks realistic, and achieving a realistic look is really difficult. So I do appreciate that, but it's just that the dull color palette makes the game just visually exhausting after a while. Another thing that I was really mixed on were the map expansions. So I think overall they felt like an upgrade over the map expansions we had before. The maps were bigger, there was more to do, which I gotta be honest makes sense considering we had to wait way longer for these map expansions this time around. Like I think this time each of them took at least half a year to come out, whereas before it was like 3 months maybe. I think in that sense it was worth it because you just get more out of it, you get more content, bigger maps. And I think also in general the maps felt like an upgrade. At least I want to say at least the Hot Wheels map felt like an upgrade with you know, like the different biomes you had in that on that map and different surface types. That one actually felt like a genuinely cool map. But the reason why I think it's more of a mixed bag is because they mostly just recycled their ideas. So, as I already mentioned, the Hot Wheels map isn't anything new. Like, Hot Wheels was a DLC in Horizon 3, and while I can acknowledge that they added some cool new ideas to it, like as I said earlier, different surface types, and generally the map itself being a big upgrade, it's still kind of the same thing we had before. It's nothing new or interesting. And I think this goes doubly so for the second expansion, which I'm gonna be honest, just sucked outright. So, the Rally expansion, it was some kind of like Rally Expedition expansion. I think it's just really boring. Like, first of all, the map does not look that different than the base game's map. If you would show someone who doesn't know anything about the game this map, they wouldn't be able to tell that it's a DLC whatsoever. It stands out very, very little. And I think that the point always was to have a branded DLC with like a collaboration with another brand, as we've had with Hot Wheels here, and then a DLC that experiments with some kind of like new thing. So for the most part, this has been weather. So in Horizon 3, you had Blizzard Mountain, which experimented with, you know, snow. And in Horizon 4, you had Fortune Island, which experimented with more extreme weather, which, to be honest, like even in that game wasn't really super explored very well. But I feel like with Horizon 5 and its Rally Expedition, it was just really a nothing burger. Like, it's just, I guess they wanted to experiment more with Rally, but didn't really pan out. Like, the rally events just felt like regular time trials with someone yapping in your ear the entire time. And also in general, like, I think the only thing about the map that felt really different was the roads. So with this DLC, they tried to make the roads a little bit more narrow, which was like a big criticism about pretty much all the Horizon games, honestly, is that the roads are just way too easy, way too wide. So I think in that one, they tried to narrow them down a little bit more. And I gotta be honest, the roads in that DLC are genuinely fun to drive on, more fun to drive on than in the base DLC. But that's kind of it. That's not what I'm buying an expansion for. I think overall, both the expansions were just kind of mixed bag. So once again, you have Hot Wheels, which just doesn't really feel like it's trying anything new. It just feels creatively void. And then the Rally expansion DLC, which fails to add or experiment with anything. Now, I remember one thing that was advertised a lot with Horizon 5 was the evolving world. So in Horizon 5, they basically talked a lot about how they can now change the map a lot with new updates or during different seasons. And this, I think, was the most oversold thing I've ever seen. So the evolving world barely was ever visible. So maybe during certain events like Chinese New Year and Christmas, there was like some decoration in some small parts of the map. And that was kind of it. I think the most thing they did really with this feature is changing the stadium into different things. And I think that was usually really, really cool. But that was literally it. I was really hoping for more from the evolving world feature, that they really just kind of transform the entire map for different seasons or different events. But it was really, that never really happened. And lastly, one thing that I'm not super sure how to feel on is the car DLCs. So if you bought the game for $100, if you got like the biggest, baddest version, this time around you didn't actually get all the content, because they started adding car DLCs afterwards, which I don't think the game needed, honestly. Like, once again, like, I always hold the opinion that there's such a thing as having enough cars in a game. And while some of the car DLCs added some genuinely cool cars into the game that we haven't really had before, it feels like generally there were way too many of them, and most of them were fairly superfluous. And I didn't buy any of them either. I imagine most people didn't buy any of them. It's just kind of like the stuff that I will probably get shortly before the game gets delisted in a few years, when the entire game gets on a hefty discount, including the DLCs. That's probably when I'm gonna get them, but other than that, it just felt so pointless, honestly. So overall, I think the main problem with Horizon 5 is just that it lasted too long. I think the game was never really meant to last this long, but we're clearly seeing some issues at Microsoft and Xbox with how they manage their teams. They've been laying off people left and right, closing studios, canceling games. So it's really obvious to me that there's something really going wrong at the moment, and I think Horizon 5 was never meant to last this long. Like, it wasn't supposed to be a live service game that runs for over 4 years. And I think this is really clear as day now, where they completely stopped all support for it, so that they can just really focus on the next game. And I think this led to a lot of fatigue settling in. Especially since Horizon 5, at its core, isn't really a different game than Horizon 4, which at its core wasn't a different game from Horizon 3 already. So, for the most part, you've been playing the same core game for 10 years. And I think this is just kind of where fatigue started to settle in for a lot of people, and the negatives started to really kind of show themselves more and more, whereas all the positives about the Horizon games just kind of started to feel more normal, started to just kind of settle down for most people as people started to get used to them. So I really think it's the fatigue for a lot of people that's really making this game seem as bad for a lot of people. And thus, I think that the main problem with Horizon 5 is that it really only reiterated and expanded on itself rather than evolving and improving in new directions. I think had they really improved the core of the game, then this game might have really lasted a little bit longer, and I think the fatigue wouldn't have settled in as much for most people, but it's just that these games have only been reiterating on themselves for so long now, for almost 10 years now, that it's starting to really like wear down on people. And so to answer the question in the title, is Forza Horizon 5 a bad game? Honestly, I don't think in good conscience I can say that it is. I think it's just that the basic foundation that the game relies on that was established years ago is just too good. And as someone who has actually played a lot of genuinely bad racing games, I would much rather play Horizon 5 than all of the shovelware garbage from the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 era. So it's not a bad game, but it should be better. Which is to say that it's a bad sequel. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. I think Horizon 5 is not as much a bad game as it is a bad sequel. I think if there's one catchphrase that describes the game very well, it's that it's wide as an ocean and deep as a puddle. Certainly some mechanics and features can be deep if you want them to, and especially if you want to get competitive into Horizon. It can have some depth, but for most people who just play the game casually, who just want to like, you know, enjoy themselves, it's just, there's so much, it feels like there's so much to do, but there's not really any point to any of it, and nothing feels very special, nothing feels very new or exciting past the opening hours of the game. I think this is what's really leading to this bad sentiment of the game. It's, you have all of the things that I mentioned before, like the dull map, dull graphics, and then you drag this out over a 4-year-long period, and it just makes the game feel a lot worse than it actually really is. At least that is my opinion. Now, there's a lot of things that I didn't talk about, mainly because I didn't really know anything about them. Like, so for example, I do recall that Horizon 5 had some issues with cheaters. But to be honest, my experience with cheating and competitive gaming in Horizon 5 is very, very limited. So if you know anything about it, feel free to share it in the comments below. But overall, I definitely want to hear from you. Like, what is your opinion on Horizon 5 now, 4 years later? Do you think it's a bad game, or are you more mixed on it like I am? Definitely let me know in the comments below. But I think that's it for the discussion of the day. Thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, take care, take it easy, and as always, peace. See you guys.